Any more questions? So I'm going to talk about my experience on the CYP IAPT Supervisors course. I was on the CBT arm, and when I came into this course, I'd been supervising for about 10 years. I'd done quite a bit of training in supervision, and somebody was saying this morning about, well, I've got lots of very experienced clinicians. That doesn't stop us learning, and actually I found this really useful, more useful than I'd initially expected, if I'm honest. So what about the course and the work? Well, there was teaching based at King's College London. This wasn't mentioned by Alex and Miriam this morning, but where you're getting your training is an international centre of excellence. There's research that is having influence all the way around the world, and you get access to these people. So that felt quite a privilege. There was teaching sessions on IAPT and also on supervision models. For me, the real joy of the course was being in a supervision group of supervisors. When do you get a chance to talk to other supervisors about what happens in supervision? This was really rare for me, and this was really rich learning, and less painful than the other sort of learning. Alison mentioned this, when I did my therapy training, I thought the worst possible thing is watching yourself do therapy. Then I discovered watching yourself do supervision. This was kind of really painful. And what I discovered is that when I'm doing supervision, I touch my face a lot. Who knows why? I don't do it in therapy. In fact, one of my memories of this supervision course is my daughter coming downstairs and saying to me, Dad, why are you shouting at the computer, don't touch your face? And don't you realise that a computer neither has a face nor arms? But this learning is incredibly powerful. I mean, Bion said that the first stage of learning is hatred. You have to let something go. And certainly watching all those videos, I learned a tremendous amount, and it really did change my practice, often in quite subtle ways, but certainly it did change my practice. In terms of my workplace, I had a weekly individual group supervision with the IAPT trainees, and also I had involvement in broader service transformation work, and also attendance at the county IAPT steering group. So in terms of going on the course, this is what I wish I would have known but didn't know. The first one less so. As a supervisor, you're going to be supervising people using measures and feedback tools. You cannot do that if you haven't used measures and feedback tools. Now, before this course, I would say 2/3 to the whole of the young people and families and children that I worked with would have had pre and post outcome measures. Very few had session by session. So in the 5 to 6 months before the course, I started doing that, because that would allow me to kind of understand what it's like as a clinician, and then I can be a kind of better supervisor. The next thing that has been mentioned is access to video recording equipment. Get this set up straight away. Next was about having a clear supervision contract with trainees. People have different experiences with different supervisors. I wanted to talk about the kind of supervision culture we wanted, and how we would take shared responsibility for that culture. And last, clarity about expectations around preparation for supervision. So the way I do supervision is that supervisees come with a supervision question. That was new to some of my supervisees. And what that does is, if they're preparing for supervision, they can make better use of the space. So it's not about offloading unprocessed material, which may well come up, but the fact that they prepare for supervision. So what was the focus of supervision? Well, for the first few months, it was all about anxiety. There was all sorts of anxiety. I think courses do this, being judged, whether you're good enough or not good enough, if you're working in the right kind of way. So supervision was about containment, about helping people understand the roots of this anxiety. I really chimed with something Judy said as well, about the videotaping of sessions. We had endless discussions in supervision about the technology, about how we do this recording. And as a problem would come up and would solve it, another problem would come up and would try and solve that. And eventually I stepped back from it and realised, actually, I don't think all of that was about the equipment. I think it was anxiety about being videotaped, that supervision would somehow become surveillance, and that was unhelpful for people's practice. So we kind of had to work with that. And similarly, if you're going on the supervision course, it might be useful to tape some of your own sessions so you know what that is like, and that will put you in a better place to support your supervisees. You heard this morning how the specialist therapy trainings delivered by IAPT have a core skills component, which is about outcome measures, but also about being a skilled helper, and then specialist therapy skills. What was interesting in my in the supervisees that I worked with, they were quite experienced clinicians, but they were a bit sniffy about this core skills, though I kind of know most of that, and were quite focused on the specialist skills. What was interesting, looking at the 68 hours of tape of supervision, the vast majority of questions that came to supervision related more to being a skilled helper than it did about the technical skills of CBT, which I think is quite interesting. The next thing I learned watching these tapes was about the importance of me as a supervisor being sensitive to the learning styles of my supervisees. One of my supervisees was could process really well, verbal information, could kind of really think on their feet. The other supervisee, while they could think on their feet, was much more of a visual learner. And I could see in the videos, in extended conversation with the other participant, they might get lost. So that allowed me to adapt supervision, so we would use a lot more visual prompts. And just generally having a more kind of visual aspect to the content that we were discussing. And if anybody's interested about how that works, come and ask me a bit later on in the Q&A. The next thing that I really liked, the first day I turned up at the IAPT Supervisors course, they talked about the interrelatedness of how we manage services, how we supervise, and what's delivered in the helping relationship. And while this is something that we all know, the fact that that was seen as being crucial spoke to me of the sophistication of the course. And how that helped was that sometimes if you got stuck about how to work something out as a supervisor to supervisee or manager to the managed, it can be useful to think the parallel what would happen in a helping relationship. And that was really useful all the way through. And one way that I tried to apply that in our supervision group, for me, the key to successful work with children and young people is something about playfulness. And I don't mean irreverence, I mean kind of serious play, but young people and children are really up for that. I think a lot of adult therapists could learn from that as well. So one of the things I tried to do was to bring this spirit of playfulness into supervision and see how that played out through the videos. The last thing I wanted to mention was just about backfill arrangements, which you've heard about. Over the years of working in voluntary sector, children's services and now CAMS, I've been part of various initiatives about training staff. I've never been in one that involved backfill. When this was first said, I thought, oh yeah, I'll believe it when I see it. But it is for real. However, for us in CAMS, recruiting specialist mental health workers is really tough. So I started on the course in January. Because of recruitment challenges and somebody leaving another post, my backfill didn't come till March. So I was kind of doing my old job and my new job. And then what happened is after 5 months of my backfill being there, they went off on maternity leave, so a whole load of other work kind of came my way. So it was kind of it was complicated. What I would say, if you're going on the supervisor's course, to think carefully about how you manage your time. The only way I survived on the course was by having set IAPT days. Because if your IAPT time gets squeezed, what probably gets lost is the service transformation work, which I think supervisors have a really important role in. And it's important to boundary your time in that way. The last thing, and this was just a bit of specific learning, big part of IAPT style supervision is about bringing the culture of feedback into supervision. And watching the videos, I saw that I did feedback in two ways. First of all, at the end of every supervision, there would be a ritual of kind of feedback. And we have a resource that was developed locally. This is called the Supervision Bullseye. And you'll notice there's 3 sectors to this. And if you like, these are the 3 key tasks of supervision. Support, how supportive am I in my supervisory relationships? Monitoring, did supervision help you monitor your practice in terms of safe, effective, addressing risk, safeguarding and the rest of it? And also learning and development. Did supervision help you develop and maintain your skills, including reflection on your practice? So what I would do at the end of supervision was ask people to kind of fill this in. Now, for years in my supervision, I would always ask the question, how did it go today? How was supervision today? What I found is that sometimes having one of these written forms and grading it according to how much they were evident just generated new information quite early on. I think it was probably about session 6 or 7, earlier, maybe 4 or 5 of our group supervision. On support, the trainee had marked a 1. And so they kind of filled it in, and I said, oh, any comments about what's on this form? And one of the trainees said to the other, go on, tell Warren about the number 1, it's fine. And actually it opened something up, because what the trainee said was that when she was talking about some work, I was using my general curiosity to ask questions about the work that she'd done. How that was heard was that every question was implicitly saying you've got it wrong, which was certainly not my intention. So this form opened that up so that I could think carefully about how I express my curiosity, and for the supervisee to think about how does she interpret my curiosity. Does that kind of make sense? The other thing I learned about watching the videos, and this is the second kind of feedback, when I'm in supervision, if somebody brings an issue, sometimes at the end of that issue I might make a comment, ask for feedback about how that particular discussion has gone. One thing I noticed in the videos, that what I would often do was say something like, is it okay if we leave it there? Can we come back to that next time? And what I noticed, these leading questions are much harder to answer in the negative. So that was again one change in my practice, that I was more careful about the kinds of ways that I sought feedback. Okay. So, any questions about the supervisor's course? Any observations from what I've said? Okay, so we're going to leave that bit there, and we're going to move on to the next section,